Lucas had always been fascinated by trains. Growing up in a small town in the Midwest, the rhythmic sound of trains passing through the night became a lullaby that lulled him to sleep. But this fascination turned to dread when he found himself at the old abandoned railway station one fateful night. The sky was overcast, and the air hung heavy with an impending storm. The clock above the platform read 11:45 p.m., just 15 minutes until midnight. He pulled his jacket tighter around him as he glanced at his watch. He was supposed to be meeting a friend, but when he arrived at the station, he found it eerily empty. The benches were covered in layers of dust, and the platform seemed frozen in time. The flickering fluorescent lights cast an unsettling glow, illuminating the scattered debris, a forgotten newspaper, an old ticket stub, and a single rusted bicycle lying on its side. Lucas took a seat on one of the benches, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and fear. He pulled out his phone, but the signal was weak, flickering in and out like the lights above him. He thought about calling his friend to check on their whereabouts, but decided against it. Something felt off, and he didn't want to draw attention to himself. As the minutes ticked by, Lucas felt the atmosphere change. The temperature dropped, and an unnatural silence enveloped the station. It was as if the world outside had ceased to exist. He could feel a prickle on the back of his neck, a sensation that someone or something was watching him. Suddenly, the sound of a train whistle echoed in the distance. Lucas's heart jumped. It was too late for trains to be running, especially at this hour. He stood up, straining to see down the tracks, and in the distance, a light appeared. It flickered and swayed, growing larger as it approached. The train was unlike anything he had seen before, a black steam engine with vintage carriages trailing behind, covered in a layer of grime. The train rolled to a stop at the platform, its wheels screeching against the metal tracks. The doors of the nearest carriage opened slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior. Lucas's curiosity got the better of him. Despite the overwhelming sense of foreboding, he stepped closer. Inside, the train was dark, the only light coming from the flickering bulbs above. The air was thick with dust and a musty smell that made his stomach turn. He hesitated at the entrance, peering into the shadows. No one else seemed to be on board. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the silence. No response, just the sound of the train's gentle swaying, as if inviting him in. The doors creaked shut behind him, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. As he moved down the aisle, he noticed the seats were old and worn, their upholstery faded and torn. It felt like stepping into a time capsule, a relic of the past. He chose a seat near the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the landscape as the train departed. Lucas leaned back, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling creeping up on him. Outside, the fog was thickening, wrapping around the train like a shroud. He could barely see the platform, let alone the world beyond. Just as he settled in, the train jolted forward, lurching into motion. The sound of the wheels clacking against the tracks filled the air, and Lucas felt his heart race. He was now on a train that seemed to be traveling to nowhere. As the train picked up speed, Lucas felt an inexplicable sense of unease. He looked around, hoping to find someone else on board, but the carriage remained empty. The flickering lights overhead cast long shadows, distorting the space around him. Suddenly, a low rumbling noise echoed through the train, making the lights flicker even more violently. The windows began to fog up, and Lucas wiped the glass with his sleeve, peering into the murky darkness outside. The landscape was a blur, nothing but a dark void punctuated by fleeting images of trees and abandoned buildings. He felt his phone vibrate in his pocket, and he quickly pulled it out. It was a message from his friend. "Sorry, Lucas. Can't make it. Let's catch up another time." A pang of disappointment washed over him. Just then, the train's lights flickered, plunging the carriage into darkness for a brief moment. When they returned, Lucas thought he saw a figure at the far end of the aisle. A shadow, barely distinguishable, but it felt as though it was watching him. "Hello," he called again, his voice trembling. No answer. Just silence. As he tried to shake off the feeling of paranoia, he noticed something strange. The train seemed to be changing. The air felt thicker, more oppressive. He glanced at the walls of the carriage, and they appeared to be warping, the metal twisting and bending like it was alive. Lucas rubbed his eyes, convinced he was just tired, but when he opened them, the illusion persisted. He took a deep breath and tried to calm himself. The train was just old, he reasoned. Old trains made strange noises and had odd features. That's all. As the train continued down the tracks, a chilling breeze swept through the carriage, sending a shiver down Lucas's spine. It was then that he heard a soft whisper, barely audible yet distinct. "Get out!" Lucas's heart raced. The voice was feminine, ghostly, and seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. He scanned the empty carriage, dread pooling in his stomach. "Is someone there?" He called out again, more forcefully this time. No response. Just the sound of the train's wheels clattering against the tracks. He looked out the window, trying to regain his composure, but the fog was so thick that he could see nothing. It felt as if the train was floating through a void. The whispers returned, louder this time, echoing in his mind. "Get out, before it's too late." Suddenly, the train jolted violently, and Lucas was thrown against the side of the carriage. The lights flickered and dimmed, plunging him into darkness once more. Panic set in as he fumbled for the door, desperate to escape. The train lurched again, and when the lights returned, he saw the shadowy figure standing at the far end of the carriage. It was tall and slender, shrouded in darkness, its face hidden in shadow. "Leave now," the figure whispered, its voice like ice cutting through the air. Lucas's heart raced as fear coursed through him. He turned to run, but the figure was suddenly at his side, blocking his path. The air around him grew cold, and he could see his breath fogging up in front of him. Lucas sprinted toward the door, pulling it open with trembling hands. He stumbled out onto the platform of a deserted station, gasping for breath. The station was just as he had left it, yet it felt different, more ominous. He turned to look back at the train, but it had vanished, leaving only the eerie silence of the night behind. The fog swirled around him, thickening until he could barely see a few feet ahead. "Get out, before it's too late," echoed in his mind again, the words haunting him. Desperate to escape, Lucas ran down the platform, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. He searched for a way out, but the fog was suffocating, wrapping around him like a shroud. Suddenly, he heard the faint sound of train whistles in the distance. They were calling him, beckoning him to return. "No," he shouted, shaking his head. "I need to get out of here." He reached the end of the platform, where the tracks faded into the darkness. Lucas felt the ground shift beneath him, and he stumbled, nearly losing his footing. He looked back toward the station, fear coursing through him as he thought of what lay behind. With no other choice, Lucas pushed forward into the dense woods beyond the platform. The trees loomed over him, twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The whispers returned, echoing through the trees, urging him to stop, to turn back. "Help us," they called, the voices of the lost souls trapped in the darkness. Lucas's heart raced as he pushed deeper into the woods. The trees closed in around him, blocking out any remaining light. He felt utterly alone, the suffocating darkness pressing in on him from all sides. As he stumbled through the underbrush, he caught glimpses of movement in the shadows, figures flitting between the trees, just out of sight. Panic surged in his chest, and he ran faster, branches scratching at his skin as he pushed through the dense foliage. Suddenly, he tripped over a root, falling hard to the ground. As he lay there, breathless, he looked up and saw a pair of glowing eyes watching him from the darkness. "Who are you?" he shouted, scrambling back to his feet. The eyes blinked and vanished into the night, leaving him alone once more. Lucas continued deeper into the woods, each step heavy with dread. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the trees. He could hear voices pleading for help, crying out in despair. "Help us! Find us!" He stumbled into a small clearing, where the moonlight broke through the canopy above. In the center stood a dilapidated train car, half buried in the ground, its paint peeling and rusted. "Is anyone there?" he called out, his voice shaky. A figure stepped out from the shadows, an older man with a long beard and weary eyes. "Who are you?" Lucas asked, his heart racing. "I am the keeper of the lost," the man replied, his voice deep and echoing. "We are souls trapped between worlds, bound to this train and its tracks." "What do you mean?" Lucas demanded, feeling a chill run down his spine. "This train carries the lost, those who have wandered too far, those who have made deals with darkness. It appears to those who seek it, but it is a trap." Lucas's mind raced as he processed the man's words. What happened to them? Can I help? You must leave this place, the keeper said, his expression grave. Those who stay risk being consumed by the darkness, lost forever. Lucas took a step back, the weight of the truth crashing down on him. But I can't just leave them. You can't save them, the keeper replied solemnly. You can only save yourself. Just then, the whispers grew louder, and the trees around them seemed to shudder. Lucas felt a surge of panic. The shadowy figures he had seen earlier began to materialize, their faces twisted in anguish. Help us, they cried, reaching out toward him with ghostly hands. Join us! Lucas turned to run, but the keeper grabbed his arm. Listen to me, you must find the light. What light? Lucas shouted, desperate to escape the torment around him. It's within you, the keeper said urgently. Focus on it. Remember who you are. With a surge of determination, Lucas closed his eyes and pictured his life outside this nightmare. The warmth of the sun on his face, the laughter of friends, the dreams he had yet to fulfill. He felt the light within him grow brighter, pushing back the darkness that surrounded him. Let me go, he shouted, forcing himself to break free from the keeper's grasp. He opened his eyes and sprinted toward the train car, where the light seemed to beckon him. The whispers turned to screams, drowning out the cries for help. Lucas leaped into the train car and felt the warmth envelop him. The shadows clawed at him, but the light pushed them back, protecting him. As he stepped further into the train car, he felt a surge of energy, as if he was being transported away from the darkness. The shadows recoiled, their voices fading into the night. Just as he thought he would be free, he felt a cold hand grab his ankle, pulling him back. No, he cried, struggling against the grasp. Help me, the keeper's voice echoed in his mind. Remember the light. Lucas took a deep breath, reaching deep within himself. He focused on the light that had guided him thus far and channeled every ounce of strength he had. With one final push, he broke free, feeling the cold grip loosen. He stumbled forward and the world around him shifted. Suddenly, he was back on the platform of the old railway station, the fog clearing around him. The train had vanished, and the night felt calm, the air fresh and cool. Heart pounding, Lucas looked around, still trying to process what had happened. He had escaped the darkness, but the memory of the lost souls lingered in his mind. He knew he could never return to that station, that cursed train. He walked away, the echoes of the whispers fading into the distance. But as he stepped onto the main road, a shiver ran down his spine. He glanced back at the station, and for a moment he thought he saw the figure of the keeper watching him from the shadows. Lucas turned and continued walking, determined to leave the nightmares behind. But in the depths of his heart, he carried the weight of the lost souls, a reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the light.